There is a specific kind of loneliness that no one talks about. Not the loneliness of the unloved, not the loneliness of the forgotten, but the loneliness of the person standing in a crowd, surrounded by noise and laughter, thinking none of you are actually saying anything. This is not arrogance. This is something far more painful. It is the moment you realize that the conversations happening around you feel hollow, that the ambitions people celebrate feel small, and that the things most people spend their entire lives chasing, approval, comfort, status, belonging, feel like elaborate distractions from something you cannot yet name but cannot stop searching for. If you have ever felt this, you are not broken. You are not cold. You are not better than anyone. But something in you has been awakened that most people spend their whole lives sleeping through. And that awakening has a cost. The cost is this: the further you see, the harder it becomes to stand in the same place as everyone else. Plato wrote about a cave. You have probably heard it summarized, flattened into a metaphor about ignorance and education. But that is the shallow reading. The real story is about something far more violent and far more personal. Imagine prisoners chained in a cave since birth, facing a wall. Behind them burns a fire. Between the fire and the prisoners, figures pass carrying objects, and the shadows those objects cast on the wall are all the prisoners have ever seen. Those shadows are reality to them. They name the shadows. They build entire belief systems around the shadows. They argue passionately about which shadow is which. And in the dark, with no point of comparison, this feels completely rational, even intelligent. Now imagine one prisoner breaks free. He turns around. The fire blinds him. The pain is real. He wants to go back. But something pulls him forward, and he crawls toward the opening of the cave, toward daylight, and when he emerges into the sun, he cannot see anything at all. His eyes burn. The world is overwhelming. For a moment, he wonders if leaving was a mistake. But he adjusts. Slowly, he begins to see. And here is where Plato stops being a philosopher and becomes something closer to a prophet. When that man goes back into the cave, and Plato says he must go back, the other prisoners laugh at him. His eyes, now adjusted to real light, cannot navigate the darkness well anymore. He stumbles. He speaks of things they cannot see. He describes a world above them, a sun they have never felt, colors that have no shadows. They do not celebrate him. They do not thank him. They call him confused, dangerous, corrupted. Plato says they would kill him if they could. And Socrates, Plato's own teacher, the man who spent his life dragging people toward truth, was put to death by a democratic vote. By ordinary people, by the majority. This is not a coincidence. This is a pattern. And it is as alive today as it was 2,500 years ago. Here is the uncomfortable truth that most self-help content will never say out loud. Intelligence, real intelligence, the kind that sees through surfaces, that questions what others accept, that refuses comfortable lies, is socially costly. It does not make you popular. It does not make relationships easier. In many cases, it makes you harder to be around, not because you are difficult, but because your presence, your questions, your refusal to pretend, all of it holds up a mirror that most people did not ask to look into. The person who refuses to laugh at a joke that is actually cruel. The person who asks why when the group has already decided. The person who sits quietly in a room full of excitement and thinks, what exactly are we so excited about? That person is not being antisocial. That person is being honest. And honesty, in a world organized around comfortable consensus, is one of the most disruptive forces imaginable. Think about the people in your life who pushed you away, not because you hurt them, but because you saw them too clearly. Think about the friendships that dissolved not from conflict but from distance. A slow drift that no one could quite explain. The truth is often simpler than we want to admit. You stopped performing. And performance is the currency of most social bonds. Plato believed that the soul has levels, not in a mystical sense, but in a deeply practical one. He believed there is a part of you that desires food, pleasure, validation, comfort. There is a part of you that competes, that wants honor, recognition, the approval of the crowd. And then there is a part of you that reasons, that seeks not what feels good or what looks impressive, but what is actually true and actually right. Most people live almost entirely in the first two, and they are not wrong for it. The human animal was built for survival, for tribe, for warmth. Belonging is not shallow. It is ancient. It is a need so deep that isolation literally shortens human lives. But there is a subset of people, and if you are watching this, you likely know exactly who you are, for whom the third part of the soul burns so persistently that the first two can never fully silence it. You can chase approval and feel hollow afterward. You can get the validation and feel nothing. You can sit at the table you worked years to reach and find yourself strangely bored, not ungrateful, not entitled, just aware that something is still missing, still unanswered, still pulling. Plato would say that is not a malfunction. That is the soul recognizing its own nature. That is the part of you that already, at some level, knows that shadows are not real. But here is where it gets darker and more honest. The same quality that drives a person toward truth also makes them profoundly vulnerable, because the person who thinks deeply is also the person who feels deeply. The person who questions everything is also the person who can be paralyzed by everything. The person who sees through illusions is also the person who has no illusions left to comfort themselves with on the hard nights. You cannot selectively turn off perception. You cannot decide to see clearly in philosophy, but remain conveniently blind about your own failures, your own contradictions, your own quiet hypocrisies. The examined life, which Plato's Socrates called the only life worth living, is not a pleasant life. It is a relentless one. It demands that you apply the same ruthless honesty to yourself that you apply to the world around you. Most people who begin this path do not finish it, not because they are weak, but because the cave, with its warmth, its familiar shadows, its community of people who all agree on what is real, is always available. The door is always open. You can always go back, and many people do. Not in defeat, sometimes in wisdom. Because Plato also understood that living entirely in abstraction, in pure thought, disconnected from human warmth and ordinary pleasure, is its own kind of death. The goal was never to become inhuman. The goal was to become more fully human, to carry the light back down into the cave, not to abandon the cave forever. So why do smart people walk alone? Not because they are superior, not because they have chosen isolation as a badge of pride, but because the act of waking up is a solitary act. No one can do it for you. No one can force your eyes to adjust to a light they cannot yet see. And in the period between leaving the darkness and learning to live in the light and then choosing to return, you are, by the very nature of the journey, somewhere that no one else currently is. That space, that between place, is lonely in a way that cannot be fixed by company. You can be surrounded by people who love you and still feel it. You can be in the middle of a conversation and feel it. You can be laughing and feel it underneath the laughter like a low, steady hum. It is not emptiness. It is the specific loneliness of someone who has seen something and cannot unsee it, who knows something and cannot unknow it, and who has not yet found anyone else who has stood in the same place and seen the same thing. This is the philosopher's burden. And Plato did not dress it up. He did not sell it as beautiful. He watched his teacher die for it. But here is what Plato also believed, and this is the part that most people miss. The part that makes all of it worth carrying. He believed that truth, once glimpsed, creates an obligation, not to perform wisdom, not to teach condescendingly, but to build, to create structures, communities, conversations, a life that makes it possible for more people to turn around, to look at the fire, to find the courage to walk toward the opening. The smart person who walks alone is not the end of the story. They are the beginning of one. The real question is what you do with the light once your eyes adjust. Because the cave is not just a metaphor for society. It is the relationship you have been afraid to examine, the belief you have been afraid to question, the version of yourself you have been performing for so long you have started to believe it is you. The chains are real, and so is the opening above you. And the only thing standing between where you are and where you could be is the willingness to endure the blinding, disorienting, socially inconvenient experience of actually waking up. Most people choose the shadow, but you already turned around. You already felt the pull. The question now is whether you have the courage to keep walking,